Hi everyone, Amy here with my final comments on our final discussion of the semester, last week's argument essay workshop discussion. I'm very sorry that I didn't get my final comments up earlier this week. It's been kind of a hectic week, and since you guys didn't have another discussion going on this week, I didn't feel quite as pressured to get it up there as quickly this time. But I just wanted to focus today really on some of the really good things I saw in your revision plans, as I usually do, and then also just some kind of final things to wrap up the semester, because we are in our final week of the semester now as you're working on revising your drafts for the deadline Friday night. So I do have some comments pulled out from FAME. It's kind of our typical strong comments that we usually see. From the people we usually see them from, I guess I should say. But I just really wanted to pull these out because it's exactly what I'm looking for in the response portion of the discussion assignments, as I've always done, and I just thought there's some good ideas for revision, particularly in these comments. So this first person here says, I think I had a lot of success this week. I'm glad I worked on my rough draft late last week, early this week, because I was able to get a lot of help from the midweek comments and the workshop. I realized from the midweek video that I didn't have the strongest beginning sentences in each of my supporting paragraphs. I need to incorporate my arguments in it instead of just stating a fact, because it will have my reader thinking of my argument as they read my supporting reasons. I workshopped Emily's paper, and it made me realize how important those first sentences are as a reader. A couple of hers were informative, more informative than argumentative, but a couple of hers had her argument in it and had a lot of impact on me. So I thought this was good because it had some really specific ideas for what this person was going to do in their revision, and I'm always looking for that in your responses when it's a workshop week. So particularly, you know, the idea of those topic sentences that I was touching on in my midweek comments, and then I also like at the end here how this person's reflecting on what they learned from seeing someone else's draft and where they were doing these things effectively and ineffectively, and how they were able to learn from both. So I do think that's an important thing to take away from the workshop in general. This person said, the critique I received this time around has been very helpful. Both the midweek update and peer review workshop have been great references thus far in my editing process. I've struggled a bit with this essay as I found it a little harder to stay focused and organized with such a highly controversial topic. I had started my essay with the initial intent being to convince the reader that all vaccinations are dire to public health. However, I quickly realized that this topic was way too broad and needed to narrow it down just a bit. Through these struggles, I've actually learned quite a bit about divorcing the draft and feel comfort in my writing experience in that argument with some revisions will be strong. So I really liked what this person had to say about how their topic kind of evolved, and also this struggle to deal with a very controversial topic. This is something that I've heard several of you say over the last few weeks, so I wanted to pull this out here because I think it's something that several of you can identify with. And then I think the response to that then is to be able to kind of modify your topic and revise as you're going along. So I really appreciated that this person was saying, you know, how they kind of negotiated this challenge and had to narrow their topic down in order to maybe not become overwhelmed by some of the counter arguments that were out there. So sometimes you'll find that you know, maybe it is too controversial, and then you have to narrow it down so that you're not dealing with every single argument that might come up, but only those that relate to the specific part of the issue that you're trying to address with your argument. So I think that's what this person's saying here. And then I also, of course, appreciated what was said about divorcing the draft, because obviously, as you can tell from your text, that's an extremely important part of the revision process. And I'll say, just like on a personal note, when I was in graduate school, I had workshop was pretty much all we did for 3 years, and it was definitely the hardest lesson I had to learn in my entire graduate career, was how to divorce my draft and kind of let the text or whatever I was writing write itself, and not kind of force it to be what I wanted it to be. So I was really impressed and thought this was very insightful, and also a strong connection to what was going on in your readings for the text over the last week or even all semester long. And then this final person says, I have been learning that some of these high-level abstract ideas take a long time to absorb. Rhetorical context makes a lot of sense, but putting the ideas into words is much harder, especially if you want to be surgical in your writing so that you can persuade a reader in a very specific and detailed way. I've noticed that ethos and logos come naturally, but expressing sympathy or pathos in writing is very hard. And this is just a very profound and insightful comment because it kind of wraps up everything that I'm trying to do as a teacher and everything that I want you guys to learn as students. Because to me, as a teacher of rhetoric, it is very difficult to help students kind of grasp and appreciate these abstract concepts. So just hearing these first couple of sentences is very kind of reassuring to me because I see that, okay, you guys get it. You see that, yes, it's very abstract, but here at the end of the semester, hopefully it all kind of comes together and makes sense. And then the second part here about like it's especially challenging if you want to be surgical in your writing. I think that's something that a lot of students deal with because a lot of students want to be kind of micro about it and look at every single word. And I think that honestly that's what writer's block is. You know, writer's block is when you're sitting down trying to write word for word, start to finish, and you just can't think of the next word that's supposed to come. But if you really look at the big picture, it's a lot easier. So I think for those of you who are more micro in your mentality or more inclined to be surgical in your writing, as this person says, it is a very difficult challenge and you have to learn to kind of see the big picture all the way through, and that's especially harder for some people, I think. And then this last statement about ethos and logos versus pathos, I would say this is definitely true, but again, only for certain kinds of writers. You know, ethos and logos are especially important when you're writing for an academic audience, but those of you who are more creative writers will actually probably find imbuing your writing with pathos much easier and might have more trouble with the ethos and logos. So I just thought this was an interesting comment because it kind of shows the differences in our strengths and weaknesses as writers. And so those I thought were all three really strong responses that you guys had come up with this week. I also wanted to highlight a conversation that was going on in one particular thread, which was Jason's. Jason had made a couple comments about the types of sources that were able to be included in the assignment. And I really appreciate your ideas here, Jason. I just didn't want to copy and paste all of this, and I also wanted to show Stephen's response because I think it's really astute. Stephen, you're just kind of on a roll this week, I guess. So you know, Jason makes a couple of comments responding to his reviewers. Jason, you actually had a really strong response too because you have some good revision suggestions here. You're talking about your ability to communicate your thoughts and transfer them onto paper. That's great. And what you might even do after this class. I really appreciated that in your response this week because it is our final discussion. But this is when you get into talking about adding personal experiences. And so you say, the one thing that's strange to me is why adding my own personal experiences to a paper makes it less credible. To me, when an author tells about personal experience after he outlines the subject, it gives a concrete example that he knows from experience what he is talking about. It may be that doing this is too informal for the genre, but to me, I think it adds something. Like I mentioned in an earlier post, the best academic papers that I have read tend to be more of a hybrid form. First, they lay out the structure, facts, and evidence. Then they take a more open tone, talking about the actual feelings of themselves and people they interact with. I guess what I'm saying is I think it's okay to write a paper solely from third person, but if someone wants to add first or second person point of view to it, it's only giving the reader more angle of vision to interpret the subject. In a way, I feel this goes full circle to the full exercise we did in the beginning of class about personality types. Some people learn in different ways. And by limiting academic papers to the third person, I feel that the argument loses something and may be inaccessible to people. So, Jason, this is all really astute and really just kind of like an upper level way of thinking. This is kind of above everything I've been trying to teach you all semester, so that's awesome. But please know that we kind of have to walk before we run. So I was just trying to get you to do these things at the most basic level this semester. And yeah, hopefully now that you've had this class, you can go on and go beyond what I've had you writing in this class. I mean, I think a lot of times students do feel held back, especially if you're a good writer on your own. And you're absolutely right that the best writers can inject a little bit of personality into even a very formal academic essay. And when they can effectively do so without ruining their ethos or kind of making the audience a little more skeptical, then it does absolutely add something in terms of that pathological, kind of elusive pathological effect that we're seeking in a formal academic paper, because you're not trying to be overtly pathological. So everything you're saying here, Jason, I think is absolutely right, but it's like the next level of sophistication beyond knowing the basic skills that you learned in this class. So if you're able to do this, then you've definitely learned everything that I had intended to teach you, and then you can even go beyond that. And so there is a class, English 122, that's required for many of you here at Front Range, and so hopefully that'll be something that you're able to kind of experiment with a little bit more freely when you get to the next highest level class. But then I did again think that Stephen had a very astute response to what Jason said, saying, I think the reason that secondary research is better is because in this argument assignment we are trying to scientifically prove a point, so using research material that's been peer reviewed gives the reader confidence that the facts in the argument are correct. And that's absolutely true. That is like the short, sweet answer to what you said, Jason, because I agree with everything you're saying, but an academic audience just wants to have confidence that the material and the evidence has been gathered in a truly reliable way, and I really appreciate that Stephen uses the word scientific here because it is in fact scientific. It is still a scientific method of asking a question. You form a hypothesis, you do some research to test your hypothesis. If your research doesn't support your hypothesis, you change your your result, and then you base your conclusion on whatever that result actually was. And I actually teach a class that's a learning community that includes biology and English, and so we talk a lot about the connections between the research process and the scientific method. So I thought it was really insightful that you brought that up, Stephen. Overall, though, I think everyone's drafts are in relatively good shape. I know some of you needed more feedback than others, and some of you were further along than others when you posted your rough drafts this week. But in general, I'm seeing some really good things, and I can't wait to read your final papers. And overall, I just wanted to say that you guys have been a great class this summer. I know summer semesters are hard. As I've said, we've lost quite a few people, but those of you who have stuck around have had some just really mind-blowing things to say, and I've really enjoyed getting to know each and every single one of you this semester. So thank you all for your hard work. Good luck before the deadline Friday night. And please let me know if you have any questions. You can always email me. Thanks so much.